What is going on, everybody? Welcome into my next positional rankings video for the 2025 NFL Draft. Today we're going to be talking about this tight end class. I would say it is a good, solid tight end class. We've got some really fun players to talk about here today. As with most tight end classes, if you're going to go 10 deep, you're going to have some projects and role players to talk about. So this isn't quite like our Edge video where our top 11 players were all second round picks. A little bit of a different position group, a little harder to find these guys, but I think that's what makes learning about these guys and studying up on who has potential all the more fun. So let's go ahead and get started. If you could, please take just a second to hit that like button as we head in. It really helps out. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss all my position rankings that we've already done or heading your way soon. And I do just want to remind you guys, if you want my thoughts on all of the tight ends, all of the players, all of my write-ups and grades and rankings for the entire draft class, you can get access to my draft guide on my Patreon. It's patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. It's a great way to support my channel this big draft month as well. But let's go ahead and get into it with my number 10 tight end, the son of former NFL wide receiver. We have Oronde Gadsden II out of Syracuse. I got to see Gadsden up close and personal at the Shrine Bowl, where he really did make some noise, had an awesome week, and I think stood out next to a lot of the tight ends down there. So I was really excited to get into his film, and I got to be honest, man, I like him for what he is as a project potential sort of mismatch receiving tight end type. Now, the size profile is the first thing you got to talk about with him. He was listed at 235 pounds in his senior year bio at Syracuse, and on the tape, man, he looks like a tall wide receiver out there. To me, it does seem like he's bulked up. He looked a little bit bigger in person down there at the Shrine Bowl, actually weighed in at 247 down there, and he was moving. He was playing well at that size. Came in, I think, about 243 at the combine, 241 at his pro day, where he did run a 4.65 40. So to me, he is at least making some efforts to get up into that threshold cutoff of 240 pounds. But there's no doubt he's a lighter player. Syracuse treated him as such. So even if he does bulk up, he's going to really have to learn how to block from the ground up. Projecting him as any sort of Y tight end, someone that is going to come in and, put his hand in the dirt and dig out tight ends. You draft him understanding that's probably never who he's going to be, even if he's getting stronger. So the blocking aspect, that's kind of on the back burner for now. But I will say, I was impressed by his tape as this sort of receiving entity at Syracuse, if you will. He's got good instincts as a player. He got that from his dad, clearly. I think his hands are awesome. He has some on and off hiccup moments in terms of drops, but beyond that, he does pluck the ball with long 33.5-inch arms. He's got 10-inch hands, not a high drop rate or anything like that, but really good at battling through contact. As a contested catch target, that was where he really surprised me. He had this ability to just kind of battle through contact and attack the football. And when you go to check his contested catch metrics, really, really good. No tight end in this class had more contested catch targets than Oronde Gadsden II. He had 50 in his career at Syracuse, and he came down with 56% of those. That's damn good. And in his final season, 2024, he came down with 17 out of 28 contested catch targets. That was good for 61%. So he does have the ball skills. He can make tough adjustments for the catch. He's got body control and a massive catch radius as well. So I like that. I think as a route runner and a separator, he's pretty damn good, especially in terms of like technical polish. He's got really good kind of Euro steps, head fakes. He pushes off at the top of his route. He's really good at kind of especially selling to the outside to open up on the inside to get those corners' hips to open up, where he'll snap his route off and come open on an in route. He'll do that on corner routes too to create inside-out separation as well. And he's not an incredible athlete, but he's got long striding speed to help pull away on crossing routes. I think the 4.65 40 checks out. I think he's got good speed. It's not the elite speed that you would ideally see from this sort of receiving mold of a, quote unquote tight end, you know what I'm saying? But I do think he separates. I do think he's a stiffer athlete. That definitely shows on film. You'll see there the C- change of direction. So his natural turning ability, it just isn't great. But C+ agility, his foot speed within his routes is pretty good and certainly functional enough to run those routes and help him separate. So he's got a lot of receiving chops that I really like that helped him produce in multiple seasons at Syracuse. He had 2 years over 900 yards of receiving, and it very well could have been 3 straight years, except for in 2023, after one of those 900-yard seasons as a sophomore in 2022. In 2023, he suffered a Liz Frank injury in like week 2 and missed his whole season. So I love that he's kind of on this trajectory, battles back from the injury, has another great year at Syracuse in a statement season from the whole team, comes into the pre-draft process and respects the deal, says, you know what, I will bulk up a little bit. I will get to the point where I'm ready to run my 40 at this weight, and I will run a pretty good 40, 4.65 at his pro day. So there is certainly stuff to like. It's just all kind of within context, right? This is my tight end 10, 4th round grade. Certainly a world where he just doesn't work out. But my high-end comp is Mike Gesicki, someone that has certainly been an impactful receiving tight end in the league. He's bounced around. He needs to be in the right scheme. He's found now a nice home in Cincinnati where they are more of a spread style offense. They'll go 2x2 or 3x1 and take that tight end and kind of isolate him as a mismatch problem for the defense to decide how they want to handle him as the isolated man on the single wide receiver side. You can do a lot of that stuff with Oronde Gadsden. I think if things go well for him, he can be sort of a mismatch receiving problem for opposing defenses to deal with. Will he ever be a complete, full down starting tight end? It's unlikely, right? We got to be realistic about what we're talking about here. But I did like the tape, a guy that probably needs to be talked about a little bit more, and I'm excited to see what happens with him at the next level. But let's go to my number 9 tight end, who does share the same grade as our next player, our number 8 tight end. So this is number 9/8B to kind of paint that tier cluster with some of these guys. But this is Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon. Another very much developmental player in my eyes. Now, Ferguson is a really nice athlete. He's one of the best athletes out of this entire list. We don't really have any of those like true burning 4.4 speed types in this draft with these tight ends, but he did run a 4.63, which is really good. He moves exceptionally well on film. He also backed up what he showed on film. To me, he's got really great acceleration into his routes and after the catch. That showed in his 10-yard split as well, where he was tied for the best 10-yard split in this draft with a 1.55 10-yard split. And he did all that with pretty good size, a lengthy 6'5", almost 33-inch arms, 247 pounds. This is your moldable ball of clay, the ideal kind of prototype receiving prospect that teams are looking for here. Now, did the film show consistency and get me all that excited about Terrence Ferguson beyond being kind of a developmental player? I'm just going to be honest, no, I didn't love the tape. I think if you want to start in the receiving game, he was a lot more raw than I expected. I would have loved to see a lot more deception in his routes, better foot speed. There was some wasted movement in his routes. He can separate with his athleticism naturally. If you get him on a crosser, he'll pull away from linebackers and safeties at times. But I didn't see the suddenness in his routes. I didn't see the sort of high IQ moments where you're sitting down in zone and kind of pacing your routes that even someone like an Oronde Gadsden showed, but a lot of the guys on this list do. But what I was really underwhelmed by with Ferguson were the hands. I worry that he's got the natural ball skills you look for at this position. He had certainly his fair share of drops in his time at Oregon, 4 drops for an 8.5% drop rate in his final season. But what really bothered me was the contested catch targets. 8 for 22 on his career, just 3 for 12 in 2024. This is a guy that I don't think has great play strength. Even if his listed size, a bit of a theme with this video is these guys' listings compared to their actual on the field play strength can be a little bit all over the place. Some of these players at 247 are strong, look the part. Not so much with Terrence Ferguson. He plays a lot lighter than that 247, and that shows in those contested catch looks. If he's got a linebacker or a DB kind of going for that ball at the same time, he lets that contact bother him, and obviously the metrics back it up, but the tape showed it too. He's not that reliable possession tight end to make those tough catches in a pinch. And between that and the drops, I just worry about the overall ball skills. Now, he's got the catch radius with that height. You like that. And the athleticism definitely helps him after the catch as well. That's definitely gonna play. I do think even if his arms are a little bit weaker with some of the blocking and the contested catch stuff, he's pretty strong in his legs. He shows contact balance. Guys will try to tackle him low, and he'll kind of chop through those ankle tackles, and he will break tackles and pull away after the catch too. So that will definitely play. It's not that he's horrible in the receiving game, but definitely just left a lot to be desired for me, and had some moments of just like, man, I really would want you to make those plays that he's not making for me to feel better about him beyond just being a project. And then as a blocker, especially, he's a project, man. He rotated at Oregon. Oregon ran one of these spread systems. They didn't really ask him to block in line. And when they did, again, he just doesn't have the play strength to do it. I think he's willing. He's got a good starting point and technique. I think you could potentially get him there, but I'm not taking him and asking him to dig out defensive ends right away. So I really do see a true project in Terrence Ferguson, which explains the wide range on my pro comps on him. Low end, I went Jay Sternberger, who was drafted in the 3rd round and never amounted to anything as this athletic developmental type. My high-end comp is Dawson Knox. I think he could get better as a blocker. Dawson Knox is a pretty good blocker for the Bills, not a great one, but good speed at the position, good size, but also someone whose ball skills have always kind of been brought into question with Dawson Knox. And I saw a lot of similarities there with Terrence Ferguson. So for me, kind of a 3rd to a 4th round draft, stash, and develop type of tight end. But let's get to my number 8/8A tight end, the same grade and similar sort of thoughts here on Elijah Arroyo. And this is probably going to be the big surprise, I think, of this video, is how low I am on Arroyo. We're starting to see a lot of those 2nd round mock drafts come out, and in the vast majority of them, you're going to see Elijah Arroyo come off the board in those situations. For me, much more of a late 3rd, early 4th round true project of a tight end. And I wanted to like him a lot more than I did. So let's get into it. Love the size, 6'5", 250, 33-inch arms, 10-inch hands. Love the athleticism. I think he's pretty fast. Doesn't look like we're going to get a 40-yard dash time from him, but the speed definitely shows on tape. He can absolutely pull away in his routes and stretch the seam and all that. I love all of that package. How can you not? But beyond the raw traits, wow, was I underwhelmed by his film. Number one, I think, even if he's listed as a full-size 6'5", 250 pounds, really underwhelmed by his overall play strength at the position. There are players on this list listed lighter that play so much stronger, whether it's as a blocker or through contact, catching the football. I'm not going to call Elijah Arroyo soft, but he does play soft on film. He just doesn't dish out contact the way you would hope with someone listed at a solid 250 pounds. So that obviously hurts his blocking, where, just like our last 2 players, it's a complete work in progress. I'd be really worried asking him to come in as a 2nd round pick, which is basically as a starter, and saying, all right, Elijah Arroyo, it's your turn. Go block Nick Bosa. Go dig out Gregory Rousseau. Like, good luck. He's not able to do that right now, and I don't know if that's something he can or will develop, right? So that's a huge issue. But this showed up to me in his kind of ability to play through contact down the field. I think when defenders did get their hands on him in his routes, he didn't really hand fight. He didn't do a great job kind of pulling through contact, and especially on the the small sample size of contested catches that he did get looks in, for what it's worth, there were only 5 contested catch targets this season, but he only converted 1 of them. So 1 for 5 on contested catches. And on those looks, he to me definitely showed like he doesn't have a great understanding right now of how to box guys out, how to use his size to come down with those tough catches. And that's just something you want from any tight end. And then lastly, run after catch. It's just not there with him. He goes down on first contact way more than someone at 6'5", 250 pounds should. I think he's a stiffer player, so he's not able to really set guys up and make them miss either. So those were just 3 key categories for this position that he left a lot to be desired for me, that I just found, dinging down his grade a little bit, to the point that his second round kind of consensus ranking, I just can't get there, man. Now, the one thing I will say about him that is a great trait of his is, even if he's not great at catching the ball through contact, he does have super reliable hands. I think he tracks the ball well over the shoulder really well on some of these vertical targets from Cam Ward. I do think as long as he's not getting thrown off his spot, he is a natural catcher of the football. So that's a huge plus, right? And that's probably the biggest distinguishing factor for me from Ferguson to Arroyo, is I'm willing to bet on Arroyo's ball skills, and if he gets more contested catch targets, because he just didn't have very many, right? Hopefully he can learn to use his size better in that department. But ultimately, this is eerily familiar to a couple years ago with Greg Dulcich coming out. Dulcich had a lot of second-round buzz, and my issues with Dulcich, who ended up with, I think, an almost identical grade here, 3rd to a 4th-round grade. My issues with Dulcich were almost identical to Arroyo, where I don't think he can block, and I don't think that he plays through contact very well, and I thought Dulcich was a much stiffer player, even if he's good speed in a straight line. And that's what I went with my pro comp. Now, hopefully he can develop in a way that Greg Dulcich didn't in the league, but I do see a lot of similarities there, and it does worry me. So I'm lower on Arroyo. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he's a stud and comes in and changes the game for some team, but I just didn't really see it with him. And unfortunately, I'm lower on him. Before we go to my next player here, guys, baseball season is underway. I know I'm going to be headed to see my Minnesota Twins in action. I don't know if they can respond from an 0-4 start this season, but I do know that when I'm buying tickets, I will be getting them on SeatGeek, the sponsor for today's video and the #1 ticketing app out there. SeatGeek has the best app with the best user interface. They color code their seats, so just look for the green dots and you know you're getting the best bang for your buck, not just on their app, but market-wide as well. They're great about having real photos of what your seats are actually going to look like. They also have the most user-friendly platform. They'll make sure you get your tickets right there in the app, so you don't have to go through email chains and fight through other apps, stress things out before you get to the gate. You'll be sure you have your seats right there in the SeatGeek app. I've been partnered with SeatGeek happily for a long time, and you may have used an older code of mine, but SeatGeek has hooked us up with a new one. So whether you are an existing TFG fan or a SeatGeek customer or a brand new one, you can use code TFG10. You'll save up to $20 on your next purchase. And above all, I just hope you have a great time wherever you're headed. If it's like me, baseball games, but basketball, NHL, playoffs heading our way too. We got college basketball coming down to the wire too. So that is promo code TFG10 at SeatGeek, and have a great time. But now the next player on my list. One more tie here. It's the last tie, I promise, in terms of the grades. But my number 7/6B tight end, we've got Mitchell Evans out of Notre Dame. And he's the first tight end on this list that has really the size, play strength, and most importantly, run blocking technique and skills to actually put his hand in the dirt and start blocking defensive ends, outside linebackers on day one in the NFL. Now, I wouldn't say he's a day one starter or going to be great at it right away, but compared to the guys we've talked about so far, he can hold his own. I would describe his overall run blocking as workable and functional. Now, for a Notre Dame Golden Domer, we've really gotten used to these tight ends being really good run blockers, super technically savvy, consistent in that phase. he was a step behind that. I think sometimes with his shorter arms, he would miss wide. I think some plays he would try harder than others as a run blocker. It was just a little bit more all over the place and inconsistent as a run blocker than I fully expected with him. But there's enough good in there to feel good with his size that he can do it as an inline, hand in the dirt, wide tight end in the league. Now, in terms of who he is as a receiver, he's just not a great athlete, right? He ran a 4.7, 4.40 at the combine. I think that shows on tape very much. He doesn't pull away from linebackers or stretch the seam or do some of this crazy exciting stuff that even some of the guys we've talked about so far can do. But I will say he has really good acceleration. He's got a great first step out of his snap as well as a run blocker. That get off is really good, and that plays really well in the run game as well. But he actually was tied with Terrence Ferguson for the best 10-yard split in this draft. So there is at least something to him as an athlete that is a plus trait. So he can get on top of his blocks quickly as a run blocker, and he can get into his routes pretty quickly, even if his speed tops out pretty fast. So if you're talking about getting into the second level to run a dig or a hitch, he can create some separation, at least against zone. Now, if you've got an athletic linebacker or a defensive back that mans him up, the rep's pretty much over. Like, he's going to be fully covered, and he's going to have to resort to winning contested catches, which takes me to the next great trait on him, frankly, is he's awesome. Winning tough catches. His contested catch win rate was at 67%, 14 out of 21 on contested catch looks in his career. You see it on film, not just if he's running a stick route and he's got a linebacker kind of draped all over him, but the quarterback gets in a pinch and he needs to trust Mitchell Evans to kind of throw his ass into the defender and stick his arms out and come down with a tough catch to move the chains, that sort of typical possession tight end stuff that you can count on from these guys. He can do that, but he also makes some really remarkable catches. He had a catch against Ohio State in 2023, right before he tore his ACL, which is something I'm going to talk about with him. It's important to note that on his evaluation. But he had a catch against Ohio State where he is covered on a dig route down the field, but just unbelievable one-handed catch. He's natural at tracking the ball over his shoulder. He made some tough catches down the field as well. So he is at 6'5". Like, he's got the catch radius and the catch and traffic skills to be a trust throw target for your quarterback, even if he isn't this great separator and this great athlete. And then on top of that, he's really good after the catch too. I mentioned the acceleration. So if he catches the ball underneath, he can turn upfield and generate some momentum pretty quickly. So he can have some contact balance and some power and some creativity after the catch. He's got a little something in the tank there. So even if he isn't this exciting receiving option, this all kind of paints the picture of these, high floor, low ceiling, call them dime a dozen vanilla possession tight ends, right? I went with Austin Hooper as my pro comp, but it feels like every year there's one or two of these guys in a draft. I think back to recent drafts, guys like Cade Stover, Jeremy Ruckert, Hunter Long, those types. Like, no one's going to really be like oohing and awing when Mitchell Evans comes off the board. But if you're a team that just doesn't have bodies at tight end, or maybe you've got an aging starter and you just need to fill out the depth chart, have someone that can come in, compete for playing time right away, whether it's as a tight end too. We're probably a year away from him being in starting tight end conversations, but I don't think it's out of his range. That's why I went with an Austin Hooper comp on him, who's been just like a solid starter throughout his 10-year career. That's the profile and the archetype that Mitchell Evans is in. Now, the last thing I want to say on him before we move on is he has really impressed me with his ability to come back from this ACL injury, and it really struck him at a bad time. I mentioned it. He was coming off ascending as a junior at Notre Dame, the history of tight ends out of that program, makes this ridiculous highlight catch against Ohio State, and then 2 weeks later he tears his ACL. So he misses the second half of his junior season, And really the first half of his senior season, he's still kind of in recovery mode. So he was, had limited snap counts, wasn't fully involved with the offense, even all the way through the season. Like, he was doing a lot of rotating with all the different tight ends that Notre Dame has, because there's probably another guy in that roster that we're going to have a similar conversation about in a couple years. But he was kind of robbed of his chance to really supplant some hype. Now, I don't think he has the traits to be a star player at the next level, but it's possible. If he never got hurt, he's got a larger production profile, and is someone that we're more talking about as a top 5 tight end in this draft. But overall, sound player. I've got him late 3rd, early 4th. Should be able to at least be a tight end 2 for you right away, and maybe could be starting if you're really hurting for tight end. But if you've already got a Cole Kmet or Dalton Schultz or some of these mid-range, tight ends, you probably don't need to take Mitchell Evans. You might swing for some of these previous guys we've talked about that do have more athletic upside and potential difference-making ability. But let's go to my number 6/6A tight end. Again, the same grade as Mitchell Evans there, but someone I'm super excited to talk about, Jackson Hawes out of Georgia Tech. I'll just come out and say it. I think he is one of the best blocking tight ends that I have written up in the last 2 to 3 years. 6'4.5", 253 pounds. Again, not all these guys' listings match up with their actual play strength. Like, that's pretty much the same size as Arroyo, but you wouldn't know it based on their tape and how much stronger Jackson Hawes is able to play. And it obviously just makes him such a better blocker from a physical standpoint. But if Jackson Hawes was just strong, he wouldn't, that alone doesn't make you a great blocker. He is technically refined. I didn't really have any criticisms about, he misses with his hands, or he's got to keep his pads down, or he's got to fire off the ball better. He's got to run his feet through contact better. He does it all extremely well. And he's been in college football for 6 years. So, he's been working on this. He's ready to go. He is ready to step into the league as a blocking tight end for 12 personnel. And I would wager he's going to be better than at least half the tight ends in the NFL today as a run blocker. He also just, he has a demeanor of a blocking tight end as opposed to a receiving tight end. There's obviously pros and cons to that. There's major pros and cons to that. But you can tell, he blocks like he's an extension of the offensive line. And I think what gives that away the most is that he actually takes his pass blocking extremely seriously. He's a really high effort, high efficiency pass blocker on top of all the stuff you can do with him as a run blocker. So that's really the selling point on Jackson Hawes. I'll talk about his receiving, but it's just not a strength in his game. He's not a great athlete either. So he is a true role player. He is a tight end 2. Reminds me so much. It felt like a carbon copy, cut and paste version of John Bates for the Washington Commanders, who's a tight end 2, who just got a 3-year, $21 million contract, right? You got to keep it within the scale of the conversation we're having. But someone, if you're in 12 personnel, or if you're a team like Washington and your tight ends are Zach Ertz and Ben Sinnott, God willing, he's able to emerge someday with a role. But, those guys are more undersized receiving style tight ends. So if it is 1st and 10 and you want to come out and run the ball, and yeah, you might be signaling to the defense a little bit that you're more likely to run the ball than not because this tight end is in the game. At least he's coming in and can actually move a D end, combo block to the second level, do some really impactful stuff as a move blocker. Georgia Tech would run sweeps and have him coming cross formation, and he would just blow up outside backers, defensive backs. He can be a legitimate extension of your offensive line. So in the right fits, he has a immediate path to playing time. And that's why I think there are teams that will look at him and his skill set and say, we'll spend that maybe compensatory 3rd round pick that we have, or our early 4th round pick, to make sure we get him ahead of anybody else, because he's the best blocking tight end in this class. And we might go another year or two before we see another prospect this refined, this ready to go as a blocking specialist. Now, I will wrap. like, I think you get the point here. Like, he's not a receiving threat. He's a horrible route runner. He's stiff as shit. He fights the ball. He does not have ball skills. He does not win contested catches. Quarterbacks don't trust him to win contested catches. I believe he was 1 for 7 in his 6-year career on contested catch looks. So maybe there's more in there with his play strength, but at this point, quarterbacks don't trust him. And the way he fights the ball, you can't really blame him. So, he doesn't really elevate or contort for the ball. It's basically got to be right on him for him to catch the ball. And even then, he has some drops. And his hand size is a little bit smaller there, 9 and an 1/8 inch hand. So that could explain a little bit of that. But really, it's not that you can't ever throw him the ball. It's just an extremely limited usage, as we saw at Georgia Tech, where, okay, it's a play action boot and he chip blocked and released and he's rolling with the quarterback. We're going to flip it to him and he's going to turn upfield after the catch. Or it's a check and release in the pass game where he's helping, he's chip blocking, and then he just sneaks out and you're in trouble. You got to throw him a dump down. Or it's an RPO and he's got a quick progression to the flat. Like, it's very, very limited in terms of route tree and what you want to do with him. Running that kind of stuff, though, I will give him some credit. As long as he's catching the ball, which he's still going to do 88% of the time because his drop rate in his career was 12%. As long as he's catching the ball, even if he's slow, he ran a 4.82 at the combine. He actually isn't totally unlike Mitchell Evans in that he's got good acceleration. And again, that really helps him in his run blocking and his get off. He can fire off the ball. But it does show after the catch, he can kind of turn up field and create some momentum. He has some impressive run after catch moments. He is so strong. He's tough to get down. So even if I was down on his receiving ability, if it is one of those situations where you're bringing him in on first down and maybe he does see a couple targets, you still have to account for him and he can still move the chains and do some stuff. So entirely limited as a receiving threat, but there are a couple things or really one specific thing that he does well, and that's catching the ball short and turning upfield where he's a handful. I'm a big fan. I just think the floor is so high as long as you know what you're getting into and you have a like plug and play fit. I think of like the Raiders, if you're done with Michael Mayer and you need that kind of perfect complementary tight end to Brock Bowers, or what the Niners have looked for in that tight end 2 role. They just signed Jackson Farrell, exactly what we talked about John Bates. If you've got that role, you are absolutely targeting Jackson Haas in this draft. And if he comes off the board in the 3rd round, I'm really not going to be surprised or have any issue with it, especially because he does something that the majority of the guys we're talking about on this list just don't do well, and that's block, which is half the position's definition. So I'm a fan. Let's move on, though, to my number 5 tight end, another guy I just didn't expect to like as much as I did, and that's Gunnar Helm out of Texas. I hate to do it, but I'm going to say it. He's just a good football player, man. He checks so many boxes for the tight end position. Not a traitsy player. He's listed at 6'5", 245. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the fastest guy either. Now, he ran a 4.84 at the combine on a bum ankle. I think on tape he plays more like 4.76-ish. Like, he can move a little bit more than that. So I want to give him a little bit of respect there, but he's still, like, obviously not that fast. He's not a twitchy athlete or anything like that. I would say he's an okay, smooth athlete. I would say his play strength is not great, but better than the 245 pounds would indicate. So I think in terms of physical tools, there's some limiting factors there in terms of overall upside and difference-making potential, but just checks pretty much every other box in terms of what you want to see at the position. As a blocker, I was really, really impressed. Again, on paper, his listed weight is less than someone like even Ferguson or Arroyo, but he plays so much stronger than that. He blocks so much better than that. And I think he can step in and hold his own as an inline Y tight end right away. He gets leverage. He has excellent technique. He to me, I mean, Haas is in a different category, but Helm behind Haas has exceptional awareness as a blocker, just knowing as he climbs to the next level, knows exactly who to pick up. He's got an excellent targeting system, whether he's coming cross formation or they're running a screen to the outside and he has to kind of navigate through flowing defensive backs and know who to pick up. He's tough, he's smart, really a good blocker, man, and he's got pretty good length, 32 and 3/4 inch arms, big hands, strong hands, gets that leverage, actually fires inside and sticks and sustains on blocks. So really like what we saw there. Another guy that takes his pass protecting seriously. This is a player that you do want to treat at times as an extension of your pass pro group, and he will contribute in that way. But that savviness, that high awareness, that football IQ that shows up as a blocker, it's all there in the receiving game, man. I think he's a good route runner. He's deceptive. When he's running those two-way goes on stick routes, linebackers don't really know whether he's going to cut inside, stick, come outside, use his shoulder fakes to win on out routes, digs, corner routes, and he'll push off at the top of his route. He's a good route runner. Doesn't have a ton of athleticism to be the great route runner for the position, but he's good enough. He does actually separate. Super consistent hands, contested catch ability. He's got a long catch radius at 6'5" with the 32 and 3/4 inch arms. He absolutely can be someone that if you're in a pinch, throw a back shoulder to him, a trust throw for him to go make a tough catch. He will do that. Now, Quinn Ewers kind of plays like a coward, so he only gave him 6 contested catch targets in 2024, but he came down with 3 of those 6. So he did show it in flashes. I think he can do it much more consistently if a quarterback wants to trust him in those situations. And then after the catch too, this again is, I'll say it again. He's just a football player, man. He's got vision and savviness. He's got like pretty good feet. He'll kind of set you up, and he's got a nasty stiff arm. He had 12 missed tackles forced in his final season. That's about 1 per game. And even if he's not making you miss, he's consistently kind of shoving you off and fighting for tough yardage. A little bit of that, something that I really highlighted with someone in Jake Ferguson, who's now a starter for the Cowboys, obviously. Really good at like catching the ball, facing the quarterback, but kind of an eye in the back of his head to understand which direction guys are coming from. And he'll just kind of subtly sidestep you when you're not expecting it. He'll make you miss and turn up field and make sure he gets the first down. Even if it's just 3 extra yards, they're 3 yards that not a lot of players are going to get for you. And you got a new set of downs instead of having to convert a 3rd and 1. So there's just so much savviness and awareness and IQ from him across the board as a blocker and a receiver. And I think he's a functional athlete. Don't be too scared of the 4.8, 4.40. He's faster than that. He's not a burner, but he's got playable athleticism. I think his floor is exceptionally high. That's why my low-end comp is a starter in the NFL in Tyler Conklin, who's just tough as nails, even if he's not a great athlete. And my high-end comp is Cole Kmet, someone who fits all of the descriptors we've just had on Gunnar Helm, a tough, savvy tight end that just doesn't blow you away with his traits. So for me, 3rd round is where I'm comfortable with this. And that could be early 3rd round. If the guys ahead of him here have gone already and you need a tight end and potentially a day 1 starter at tight end, I'm cool with them at, pick 65. Any earlier than that, maybe a little bit rich for a lower upside tight end. But even then, back into the 2nd, probably not going to knock it too much. I was just really impressed by his ability to just play this position. But moving on, we have my number 4 tight end. This is actually Mason Taylor, and I like Mason Taylor. I really do. It's just my number 3 player. If you follow me on Twitter, I kind of fell in love with their number 3 player here. But Taylor's kind of your prototype ball of clay, athletic, potential like high-end starter in the league. He definitely has a chance to be one of your impactful matchup problem, call him a difference-making tight ends in the league, but he's a good ways away from that right now, which is fine. He's Still only 20 years old. He turns 21 in May. So we can get there with him, but there's definitely some weaknesses and some stuff for him to work on. But I want to start with what he does well and kind of what you have to work with. And there's a lot, especially in the receiving game with Mason Taylor, who is, by the way, Hall of Fame pass rusher Jason Taylor's son. So the bloodlines at his age, certainly worth betting on. And Taylor definitely got some of those athletic traits. We'll start there. I mean, he's not the fastest tight end. He ran a 4.65. I think that's about right. He's got good speed. He can pull away. He can stretch the seam. Just he's not going to do it at an elite level, right? But he can do those things. But he's a great athlete in terms of stop, start, oily hips, quick feet. So many of these tight ends are high-hipped athletes. They struggle to turn. They struggle to kind of sink their hips and cut. Mason Taylor can do that. He's also got the quick feet to kind of set up routes and do some really nifty stuff that not all tight ends can do. Now, a big reason he can do that is he is not of a filled-out frame. He is a skinny tight end. Another one of these guys, all right, he's listed at 6'5", 250 pounds, but show me the film where he plays up to that size. Because on tape, he looks like he plays at about 240. And when he hits people as a run blocker or guys come up to tackle him, you don't see the play strength in those areas of his game. So I would love to see him add more functional play strength, bulk up, and that's when you could really talk about him as a super high upside tight end. I do worry, though, that that's kind of wishful thinking, and that's not necessarily something I'm projecting with Mason Taylor, even if there's some growth in that department, because we just don't always see that, right? But I'm viewing him as kind of a Mike Gesicki, Zach Ertz type of thinner but really athletic mismatch type of receiving weapon that hopefully, again, can get more workable as a run blocker. To the point that if you got to put him in line, he can survive doing that 10 times a game. Like, I think that's the wishful thinking. Right now, you can't do that. He is a abysmal run blocker. He misses wide with his hands. Does have shorter arm length, 32.25-inch arms, so that could be a part of it. But even when he does connect, there's just not a lot of pop there. He plays with bad pad level. I don't love his effort against the run consistently. Watching his run block tape at LSU, it felt like they took a wide receiver and asked him to block as a tight end. There were some flashes of effort and some flashes even of some play strength moments. There was a play where he climbs up and seals off Jahad Campbell, who's a stud linebacker, obviously, for Alabama. He had his best run block rep came against Jahad Campbell, where he climbs up, he seals, and there's a long run for LSU. So there's some flashes in there, but they are far and few between, and you're just hoping you can get a little bit more out of him as a run blocker. But again, I'm just not projecting that to be a huge strength in his game. But as a receiving threat, really a smooth player, exceptional hands, catches damn near everything, 10-inch hands, had just one drop on 79 targets. I think he's a good contested catch target. There's some times where that play strength, that lack of play strength does show up. Guys will, they'll hit him before the catch, but as we know, against a tight end, they just don't call it very often. You got to stay strong through that contact that is coming from linebackers and bigger safeties. So, he'll get bumped. He'll struggle to make a couple catches in traffic, but for the most part, he extends his arm. He attacks the ball. He doesn't let DBs go get it. He stays QB friendly. He'll round his routes back to the quarterback. So he'll have some of those contested catches where, he is kind of boxing out defenders and making some savvy trust catches for the QB. Excellent catch radius at 6'5". He can elevate for the football. He'll high point it. He'll go over defenders and make really tough catches. Excellent body control to kind of contort for catches. If it's a little bit behind him, he can show that hip flexion that we talked about to turn around and make some really nice plays. So I think in terms of just being the athlete, getting open and catching the football, he could do that really, really well. And that's impressive for a 20-year-old prospect. It's just continuing to develop that. I think some of his routes do show some kind of wasted movement, some extra steps, a little bit of predictability at times. Can he add a little bit more muscle to become, can he go from what he was in college, a 50% contested catch win rate guy, which is good? Can he get up to more of a 60% guy and really show a little bit more strength in his arms? So a little bit of development. And then can you really work around some of the weaknesses with the run blocking? And then the other negative is really nothing after the catch. Again, the lack of play strength, the lack of power as a runner, contact balance. He only forced 5 missed tackles in his final season and was 64th in college football in average yards after the catch. So there's something missing there. But yet another area where just a little bit more bulk without jeopardizing the athleticism too much. It's hard to find that balance, but at just 20 years old, you hope you can just get a little bit more play strength from him. And I think all of these negatives can become maybe not strengths, but less of weaknesses to the point where he can actually be a really nice, complete player. So to me, second round, maybe early third, depending how the board falls. Probably not someone I'm asking to play too much right away, kind of as a rotational piece, or maybe I do have a really good blocking tight end, but I need a little bit more of a receiving option. You can kind of play him on third downs as he develops. There's ways he can be used right away, but the upside for him to be a complete player is definitely there. Just need to see some of that coaching and development. But let's get to my number 3 tight end, Harold Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green. If you've heard of him, it's because he led all of college football in receiving yards last year by about $160 over Nick Nash out of San Jose State and Tatora McMillan. Also was PFF's highest graded player, tied with Ashton Ginty at a 95.9 PFF grade, whatever stock you want to put into it. The fact is, his play in college at Bowling Green, absurd. Truly, truly absurd. The caveat, he's kind of this positionless tight end, undersized, 6'3", 240 pounds, not fast, 4'7", 140 for an undersized tight end. Kind of meh. What do you do with this guy? And going through Harold Fannin's tape, I had the exact experience I had with Bucky Irving last year coming out of Oregon, where super fun tape, excellent football player at the college level, but with kind of bottom of the barrel measurables, was really hard to come out and say, yeah, he's going to be good in the NFL. Now, I didn't hate Bucky. Tried to kind of thread the needle, had him as like an early day 3 guy. I think he was like tied for RB9 for me. I was giving him a chance to be good in the league. But obviously looking back on it, I wish I was higher. And looking back on it, if I were drafting for a team, I probably wouldn't have ended up with Bucky Irving, and asked myself, why wasn't I higher on him, right? And when it comes to Harold Fannin, I don't want to just let what happened with Bucky Irving last year dictate how I treat Harold Fannin, but it was kind of the same experience. And when I started watching Harold Fannin, I was originally kind of coming in with the same stance of like, yeah, maybe this works, maybe it won't. But the more and more I watched of him, I just reached a point where I was like, this is such a, whatever position you want to call him, and I'll get into kind of how you can use him and what his role fit is in the next level, but whatever you want to say he is just such a damn good football player that this is a guy that I would rather bet on and be wrong and say, well, turns out the physical traits didn't translate, than to rank too low and look back on it and say, well, if I were drafting, I would have let someone else get that. I'm willing to bet that this is going to translate. And honestly, I was expecting so much of this production, the 1,500 yards, to be like, like Jonnu Smith type of stuff where it's play action and he's a wing tight end and the defense just lost him and it's garbage defense because it's, Bowling Green competition and, he's big and strong after the catch and, kind of this weird production that would have maybe been a little bit less projectable to the NFL. No, his 1,500 receiving yards were like real receiving yards. The amount of stuff that he does down the field as a receiving target, a receiving entity, if you will, that I do think will translate to the NFL. It blew me away. So let's get into it. I think as a route runner, he has everything you look for. He's a deceptive route runner. He understands how to set guys up with shoulder fakes. He uses his size well to push off at the top of his route in a way that's not going to get called. He's got fluid change of direction skills for a tight end position. He can snap off routes with quick feet and agility. Really liked his route running. His ball skills. This is where I believe in him the most. His ball skills are stupid, dude. Outside of a couple drops, he catches everything, tracks the ball over the shoulder, plucks the ball, smooth transitions after the catch, all that. But on top of that, man, the catch in traffic, the way he fights for body positioning, they line him up as an outside wide receiver, threw him a go ball, and even though he's not necessarily stacking the DB, although he did use a little stop and start to at least throw the DB off on that play, but he's got the X wide receiver thing where he's able to separate before the catch. Even on the outside as a perimeter wide receiver, as a 20-year-old, he understands. He's got that football IQ, the awareness to know, I just got to throw a little push off here, separate right before the ball arrives, right over the shoulder, boom, no problem, I'll make the catch. Stuff like that shows up nonstop with him. And a theme as we kind of rave about him is even though he's not fast, he is a good athlete. Like, I want to talk about the way he can kind of elevate and show the body control and contort for tough catches. You can tell, like, he's got the explosiveness, the leaping ability, the kind of, flexibility to make some of these impressive catches. Even if the 40 was slow, he was tied for second in terms of 10-yard split. He had a 34-inch vertical jump, 118-inch broad jump, 6'9", 7'3" cone, 4.39 shuttle, like even 22 bench press reps. So like he's actually not a horrible overall athlete, and he's got 32.25-inch arms, which, for the position is average, but relative to his height is pretty good. There's actually a lot of measurables that are kind of good and worth betting on for him. And it's not like 4.71 speed is like abysmal. It's just not great relative to an undersized tight end. So that all shows up in like every phase of his ability to kind of get open, make tough catches. But man, his run after catch ability, this is one of his biggest traits that you can write home about him. Some of the plays he doesn't have the top speed, but there's a lot of Deebo Samuel in his game where he'll truck you and he's got contact balance and they'll just kind of flip him the ball on like a shovel, and he's got vision and shiftiness. Like wherever you put him, he just wows you with his overall, whether you want to call it football awareness, football IQ, his it factor, his spatial awareness, whatever it is, he's got it. But he'll stiff arm you, he'll truck you. He's just wildly instinctive and creative with the ball in his hands. Now, the ultimate question is he a tight end? Kind of. I'll actually give him a little bit of credit. Bowling Green, this surprised me too. Like, they didn't just use him as an F tight end and a slot wide receiver. They did all that stuff. They were very smart in his usage. And if you draft Harold Fannin, you should run back Bowling Green's tape and put some of those plays in your playbook for him. But they did actually have him stick his hand in the dirt, try to dig out tight ends, and actually block as a wide tight end. And yes, it's a lower level of competition, and I'm not going to say he wowed me, but he impressed me. He's got the effort. He actually blocks with good technique. He does have adequate arm length. He doesn't have the size and play strength to fully hold up, but he at least did enough to get in the way in those situations. And I think if in a pinch you had to play him as a wide tight end 8 snaps a game, you could get worse. You could get what we saw from Aronde Gadsden or even Elijah Arroyo, who does have the full size. Like, I think he's better at the wide tight end stuff than some of those late, more mid-round developmental types. So I want to give him some credit there, but obviously as we kind of round this conversation out with how you use him, what position is he, he does have to go to a team that's got an open mind and can be creative with him. But teams are so much better at this than they were even 4 or 5 years ago. There's so many pieces of different playbooks that you can pull, or certain teams that have stuff in place where they can take a Harold Fannin and use him in that role immediately. And if you can do that, I think his floor is actually exceptionally high. And what we're talking about here is, okay, it's 12 personnel. You put him as the wing player, where he does actually block outside linebackers and slot corners really, really well. I mean, when he's blocking on a bubble screen for someone else, he's awesome at it. Or coming cross formation more as like a fullback type. Like he can lay into guys. And, if you're running split zone and you only have one tight end on the field, you can take him as a split zone player, have him go cross formation. And all he's got to do is flush that backside defensive end or outside backer out of the play. Like he can do that. I think also for all these Shanahan style systems, think of how guys like Jawan Jennings are used, or Cooper Kupp, what we've seen with Brock Bowers. If you have another tight end you like and you treat Harold Fannin as basically a wide receiver 3/tight end 2, that's his best role, where he's kind of a slot wide receiver / tight end, can contribute as a blocker. That's not even like this far-fetched random role. That in a lot of offenses in the league, like the Rams, like Houston, who just hired a Rams coordinator, like the Bucks, that's a legit starting role, potential identity piece for the offense. So again, if this were 5 years ago, I would probably be a little bit more against Harold Fannin. But for me, he's going to be, I think, a top 50 player for me in this draft. I think he's going to make the final top 50 big board. I've got a true second round grade on him. Yeah, there's going to be some teams where he is more of a role player and a 4th round grade. I understand that. But I think there's enough close comps and usage projection to really like him. So for me, my low-end comp is Isaiah Likely. Ravens fans got really upset about that. Likely fell in the draft a couple years ago, before all of this stuff we're talking about has evolved even further in across the league. But the thing with Likely was kind of similar, right? Like, really good football player, but what do you do with him? He goes to the Ravens, who run about as much 12 personnel as anybody, and they're able to put him in some of these, bonus spots for a tight end too. Has he fully emerged as a full-time starter as a Y tight end? No. But I look at Harold Fannin's tape, and Ravens fans got so mad when I put this as my low-end comp. For me, Fannin, he does need to go to a situation like Isaiah Likely landed in if he's going to be as high floor of a player as Isaiah Likely is, as a very useful kind of 3rd or 4th receiving entity on your team. But to me, that's a floor, and that's worth a 2nd round pick from what we've seen from Isaiah Likely. So that adds up. But for my high-end comp, and I don't know how different this player even is from Isaiah Likely, but I just wrote down Brock Bowers wearing a ball and chain. Like, picture Brock Bowers, in a prison yard, and he's got the iron ball attached to his ankle, so he's not as fast. I actually think Harold Fannin basically is Brock Bowers if he was attached to maybe a 30-pound anchor, just because the speed's not there. But man, in terms of like what they do, how they do it, where you use them, just look at Brock Bowers last year. Like, you can do so much of that stuff with Harold Fannin, in my opinion. So I didn't expect to have him this high. I really didn't. My track record shows like I pumped the brakes on a lot of these undersized guys, but this is someone I'm really betting on, which means he's probably going to get to the league and no one's going to know how to use him, and he's going to stink. But that is how things go. I really was impressed, and is someone I'm betting on as tight end 3 in this draft. And I really want to hear what you guys think about that, whether you agree or disagree, or maybe I sold you on him. Would love to hear from you guys on that. But it wasn't quite enough for me to put him over my tight end 2, Colston Loveland, out of Michigan. Now, I will say, based on kind of what I watched and what I wrote down and came to the conclusion on him, I hate to say he's the most misunderstood player in this class, but he is probably the player in this draft that I do listen and hear other people talk about him, and my like perception of this player is different than what a lot of people say about him. So two things that a lot of people say about him that I'm not in agreement with. Number one is how high some people are on him. Daniel Jeremiah, for example, and I have the utmost respect for DJ. He just had Colston Loveland as the number 7 player in this draft. Like, that's just rich for me. It just is. I've got him as late first, early second, probably more in the 25 to 30 range of this draft. So in terms of the caliber that some people have him at, and Jeremiah's not the first person I've heard to have him as like a top 15 player. But I kind of disagree with that. And then number 2, kind of the type of player he is. You know, I've heard people say he's kind of this, you know, like Dalton Kincaid type, like really athletic, receiving only tight end. That's not so much a blocker. That wasn't the conclusion I came to with Colston Loveland. I do understand why people say that, because his frame's not really filled out yet. But to me, he's very young, and I think is in the process of filling out that frame. And when I watched his run blocking tape, I expected it to really stink, and I thought it was fine. Honestly, I thought even though he is a thinner player and he's got room to fill out that frame. I mean, he's 6'5.5". He's got almost 33-inch arms. Like, there's room to fill out that frame. But even as a thinner player on tape, I actually thought he had some pop in his hands. He had good pad level, really good effort, excellent technique coming out of that Michigan system. Like, I think he can actually put his hand in the dirt as a wide tight end and not thrive at it day one, but survive at it day one. And hopefully, you know, he's at 248 right now. Can we get him up to 256? Add a little bit of play strength on top of the run blocking tape we've already seen. I think that can actually be a wide tight end in that sense. So for me, I saw more of a inline option in Colston Loveland, and I actually saw a lot less of the athleticism and kind of this idea that he's this maybe Zach Ertz, Dalton Kincaid type of true, like, exceptional athlete, receiving tight end type. I don't know. I actually thought he was a little bit stiffer, not quite as fast as I was expecting, a little bit heavier footed, not as good after the catch, certainly. Not as snappy in his routes as I was expecting to see based on kind of what people had said about him. I would actually argue I was a little bit underwhelmed in that category, just in terms of the fluidity of his movements and the overall route running. And again, the run after catch, where he's actually pretty poor for the college level. But I do definitely see a lot of receiving chops. Like, there are flashes in his routes, certainly. I think there's a lot of developmental upside there to, you know, bring out more of the shoulder fakes and the push-offs and stuff. The flashes are in there. There were a lot of times where a lot of wasted movement in his routes, where he's getting into his route and there's 3-4 steps, and it's like, you're not doing anything with those steps. So the technique in his routes, plus, like, again, I don't think he's got fluid hips. I think he was stiffer than I was expecting, and his feet were heavier than I was expecting. So I don't think he's this great route runner. There were some flashes and can get a little bit more out of him there. But I do definitely see the excitement with his hands and the spectacular catches and the catch radius and some of the flashes of tough catches that he does make. Now, you know, he's got super reliable hands. He had just 2 drops on 82 targets in his final season. More drops on tape in 2023, but I think reliable hands, the catch radius, the ability to attack the ball in the air. There are plays where he contorts his body and just, you know, the QB's just throwing it up, go make a play, and he does it. And it's just like, man, there is some serious ability to make incredible catches from this player, and that's super exciting. I love that about him. But there's some cons in terms of the ability to make tough catches too. You know, the catch in traffic stuff, it's just inconsistent, and you're sensing a theme here, like flashes that he can do this more, but he's got to do it more. He was 2 for 10 on contested catches in 2024. Now that comes with a massive caveat. Now that's a horrible percentage, 20%, but it comes with a massive caveat. He was battling through this shoulder injury. And it's just really hard to play through that, right? Like, and that's the one area especially where, he might be getting bumped before the catch in that shoulder, and he's got to play not just through getting bumped off target a little bit, but dealing with the pain of that on the spot. Like, that's not an easy injury to play through. So the 2 for 10 on contested catches in 2024, it's more of a footnote than something I'm really worried about. But, 5 for 11 in 2023 as well, 45%. It's good. I think he's a good contested catch target, but to me, it's like, again, inconsistent moments and just more to prove. Kind of painting this picture of like, man, I think he's a little bit more of a developmental prospect than he gets credit for. I think even though he's fighting through the shoulder injury, he's got to be more QB friendly. There's a lot of times where he's running, say, an out route or a hitch route, and the QB's throwing it to his spot, and he's hoping Loveland will round out his route or work back to the ball, and he's not always doing that, and that just makes the catch harder. So I think he's got to get better at that. Again, I think bulking up a little bit will just make his entire game better. I think it'll make him a better, tough concentration catch guy through contact to get that rate up a little bit. And I think that will help him after the catch too, because right now, I already mentioned it, but like, dude, after the catch, he just doesn't offer anything. 3 missed tackles forced on 56 receptions last year, a little bit better in 2022 without the shoulder injury, but hardly, 4 missed tackles forced on 45 receptions, sorry. But yeah, I'm not trying to come off as a Colston Loveland hater. I think the best way I can put this is I like Loveland. I don't love Loveland, if that makes sense. There is, as I've described, really stuff to like. And I look at him, he's not even 21 years old yet. Turns 21, like right on the draft day. And I see a guy that can develop some of these areas, the route running, the physicality at the catch point, the physicality after the catch, and using hopefully some increased frame to add some more play strength and become, go from a solid blocker to a good blocker at the next level. But there's obviously stuff to work on here, right? Like, I don't think this is some super high floor first round, take him in the top 10 type of tight end. I think there's some risk that this stuff doesn't develop, and he's not a great player. I'm willing to bet on him as someone that will show at least some form of development in any number of these categories. And that's where my low-end comp is Dalton Schultz. I think the steady hands, especially, and someone that's a pretty good run blocker who's maybe a little bit more of a thin player in the league. I like the Dalton Schultz comp as someone that should at least be a starter for you in time. It might take you a couple years, but I'm willing to project at least some form of development there to get to that level. But if kind of all these boxes get checked, I do see a similar type of athlete to TJ Hawkinson, and maybe that's what someone like Daniel Jeremiah is betting on as more of a top 10 pick, which is closer to where Hawkinson went. But yeah, I think Loveland could be a top 5 to 10 tight end in the league someday if all these developmental boxes get checked, but they do need to get checked. And for me, top 20 for that player does just get a little bit rich. So that's where I came in on Loveland. I'm curious your guys' thoughts on that. I don't think I'm a hater. I hope I'm not a hater because I believe in this player, but I do think the discourse has just reached a level that I can't quite get to with him, and the just kind of general idea of who he is as a player, I disagreed with a little bit. I think he's a better blocker than he gets credit for, and not as good of an athlete as he gets credit for as well. But let's finish with Tyler Warren. You knew who it was going to be before you clicked on the video, so not a big surprise there. But what a fun player, man. Breaks out in his 5th year at Penn State. And, he gives you something not a lot of guys that we've talked about here today offer. And he gives that to you theoretically out the gate. Loveland, you hope can get there. Maybe Mason Taylor has some of that upside. Maybe some of those guys down the board can really surprise you. But there just aren't many players that can play wide tight end, put their hand in the dirt and block for you, but also do a lot of the exciting F tight end stuff that we've talked so much about today. The coming in on the wing, being a mismatch problem, being a dynamic run after catch threat, being a real headache for an opposing defense. There's not a lot of guys that offer both those things, and ultimately for Tyler Warren, like, that allows you as an offense to change your DNA, to just have one tight end that you plug in, and you don't have to be constantly trying to scheme around it. That's the selling point on Tyler Warren. Well, that on top of the fact that he's just a really good, fun player that seems to have really figured things out here as a fifth-year player out of Penn State, someone with a former quarterback pedigree that just, was kind of newer to the position and had to figure things out. I want to finish with his receiving prowess and the excitement there, and just kind of start with his blocking just to kind of check that off and talk about it. So he's an okay run blocker. He's got the size, he's practical, he's got okay technique, he tries, he's got the effort, he definitely has the play strength. I will say, I wanted to like his run blocking more than I did. I think he's really inconsistent there, and if he's going to be a superstar tight end and really pay you back as a top 10 pick, I want to see just a little bit more development there. He doesn't need a ton of development, but a little bit more development there. I'll get that out of the way. On top of that, just 31 and 3/4 inch arms. So I think that plays in with some of the inconsistencies. Doesn't always win the first rules of engagements against defensive ends to get his hands inside and really, set the point of attack and dictate himself as a blocker. He tries, he gets himself in the way. He's adequate with his size. He can do the Y tight end stuff. Don't get me wrong, but I want to see him get better at it. That's the biggest thing with him. I want to see him get better as a blocker. That's a normal thing for basically all these tight ends, right? Not named Jackson Hawes, who had 6 years to do it in college. So hopefully that can get there. Now, as a receiving threat, he's just so fun, man. I want to just say, like, the two areas with him as a receiver that I think are question marks, and then we'll just kind of rave about him to end the video. But number one, he's got a history of drop issues. Now, in 2024, where he, again, kind of broke out in his fifth season, was good to go. He had just 3 drops on 125 targets for a 2.8% drop rate. Like, that's good to go. That's super reliable. But you go back to the 2 previous seasons where he wasn't as involved, way less targets, but he had over 15% drop rate in 2023 and 2022, even with the exceptional 2.8% drop rate in 2024. His career drop rate is still at 6.7%. So the optimistic outlook is, yep, he broke out in 2024, secured those hands. We don't got to worry about it. The potential pessimistic outlook is, well, we know drops are volatile and those can creep back at any moment. So that's one potential question mark, is, do the drops creep back in? And later in the season, there was a drop against Oregon in the playoffs and a drop against Boise State in the playoffs, whereas he had just 1 drop in the regular season. So I'm not saying he has drop issues. I'm saying he's got a history of it. And that's one potential question mark on a likely top 10 pick here that you just got to hope, he's nipped that in the butt. The other thing is, I would say he's an inconsistent separator, and his combination of athleticism and route running is just okay. Now, I don't think he's a special athlete. It doesn't look like we're going to get a 40 time from him. I think he's probably like a 4.68 40. I don't think he has great speed. He can pull away on crossing routes and that kind of stuff, but there are reps where faster linebackers can kind of turn and run with him, and he lacks some separation there. And I think in terms of his technique with his route running, he's a little bit of a tighter hipped athlete. He's a little stiffer in his turns, so he doesn't always separate within his routes. Sometimes he ends up resorting to contested catches and tough catches. But there are good flashes with his route running too, right? Like, it's not all bad. I give him a B- grade for route running. He's got the push-offs at the top of his route. He flashes the use of head fakes, which I think you could use even more. But some of that misdirection within his routes that these tight ends do so much, he's got that. I love the way he slips through kind of mid-range defenders if he's trying to clear into the seam or he wants to get behind him and run a dig. really good at kind of sidestepping and kind of shoving off or swimming past those intermediate kind of hook zone defenders. Really good at getting past those guys into the second level. So again, he's not a bad route runner, just, some lack of polish. Sometimes he's got some wasted movement in there as well, where he's got a couple too many extra steps and lacks some of that deception on top of it. So he does separate. It's just not a defining aspect of his game, and he's maybe got a little bit of room to improve there. But beyond that, again, a history of drops, and I would just say good, not great separation skills. He's spectacular, man. I mean, the instincts and the ball skills and the amount of spectacular catches that he makes, one-handed grabs, mossing guys, going over the top of dudes in the end zone, like whatever it is, his ability to just make stupid catches, like just insane highlight reel type of stuff from him. It's in there, and I don't think it's going anywhere. Like, he's got the ball tracking, the physicality at the catch point. He ended up 62% contested catch win rate in his final season at Penn State, which these weren't all easy catches, right? Like, some of these are just insane contested catch wins to get to 62%. And even going back when he had some of those drop issues, 50% in 2023, 75% in 2022, 2 for 2 for 100% in 2021. So he's on his career, 21 of 33 on contested catch looks, 63.6%. Like, I trust that. Like, he is going to be a guy that you just put the ball in his area if you're in a pinch, and he has an it factor. He has difference making ability to win tough catches. And then the other difference making ability he has as a receiver is the run after catch, which I don't need to sell you guys on it, man. I mean, they put him as a wildcat quarterback, and he had 200 plus yards on 25 carries with 11 missed tackles forced on those 25 carries. That shows up in his receptions. He had 19 missed tackles forced. I think that'll translate to the league. And he had, 6.7 yards after catch. Is really freaking good, man. He's a speed train runner. He's got stiff arms. He's got trucks. He's got relatively quick feet. While I think his natural change of direction and his ability to turn is lesser, I think he does have good agility for the position to kind of, do the stop-start stuff. And, you're taking a hot angle on him because you want to hit him hard to get him to the ground. He'll just, stop, start, make you look like a fool. You just whiffed at him diving at his ankles. Like, he's got really good instincts in that way. So the combination of shiftiness, vision, awareness, and physical strength to be an impact after the catch. Again, I'll use that term, difference maker in that category. And then I love too, like, I don't think the quarterback, the Wildcat QB stuff has to just go away. I actually think you can use him in that way. You get down at the goal line and you can have a package for him. He's really freaking good at it. And he can throw the ball too. He's got a QB background. Or, you know what, we see so much in the NFL now where you can motion him in as an under center quarterback. He's a trustworthy person to get the snap because he's done that before. And he's excellent as kind of a QB sneak, tush-push kind of guy. The Packers do that all the time with Tucker Kraft. Like, you can absolutely at least do that. But that's just kind of a bonus thing on top of all this stuff that a creative coordinator can actually do some of that stuff that Penn State did and get even more out of him. So he's super fun. I think the breakout's here to stay. I'm not worried about the fact that he didn't really do too much for the first 4 years. Tight end's a position where that's not totally abnormal, and it's not like 2023 was terrible. He did have 422 yards, 7 touchdowns. He was still a player. It's just he really broke through as a superstar in that final year. I struggled with a great pro comp on Tyler Warren. I ended up going with Dallas Goedert, but with more opportunity. Goddard came into the league as a tight end too with Zach Ertz there. And then 2021 was an elite year for Dallas Goedert. And then 2022 happens. A.J. Brown shows up. Devonta Smith emerges. He becomes more of a, I don't want to call him a role player, but God, he just isn't getting the opportunity and the work share throughout his career because of the talent that's been around him in Philadelphia. So I don't think this is some disrespectful comp to go with Dallas Goedert. in a different situation with more opportunity, I think there is a world where we're talking about Dallas Goedert more as kind of a, baby Gronk type of situation. I didn't want to go with Rob Gronkowski as a comp on Tyler Warren because I don't think the run blocking is as good as Gronk. And Gronk is the best true tight end ever. That's pretty crazy to go with that comp. I think a lot of Dallas Goedert is a comp, and ultimately it's just a stupid pro comp anyway. But, for what it's worth, they are both exactly 6'5", 256 pounds. And I think the combination of incredible catches and crazy catch in traffic and run after catch ability, and not special athletes, just really good athletes, I think a lot checks out for that Dallas Goedert comp. So there's your top 10 tight ends. Thank you so much for watching. I want to hear your guys' thoughts, where you agree, where you disagree. What are your tight end rankings? If you think anybody got snubbed, I did watch 13 tight ends for this video, fully written up, and plan on having all 23 guys that were invited to the Combine eval'd come draft day on my draft guide over on Patreon. At some point this month, we're going to be getting into team-specific 7-round mock drafts as well for all 32 teams, one for each division. Those will be exclusively just on Patreon. If you want some exclusive content, you want all these write-ups and player rankings, and you want to support the channel in the process, that's going to be at patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. Other than that, really appreciate you guys for watching. If you could hit that like button on the way out, make sure you're subscribed. I really appreciate it. And my next position is going to be cornerbacks. Much anticipated one there. Going to be probably a whole week until we get to that one, though, because I still got some players to watch. Going to the Twins opener tomorrow, and then we got the movers starting to move into our new place on Friday, too. So a busy week here. Probably going to be about a week till the next video. So for those of you asking for that, that's what you can expect. But thank you for watching. I'll see you later. Peace out.